All right.
And then we'll go ahead and get back into where we were going. So where we're going to be accessing the training for today, which is the Qualification Admin training, is under the Tools and Admin section of the account. And then the Qualifications link here. That qualification section will take you into where all the qualifications are currently stored. The qualifications that you're seeing here are qualifications on your account. However, the only one that I have in use is one that I'm going to be showing in the demo today. Nothing else has been made in use. As I mentioned earlier, if we have to make changes or adjustments to the qualifications that currently exist in the account, we can definitely do that. To start off, we're going to cover how to create a new qualification, and then we'll go through how to view the qualifications that are currently on your account. It's very easy to create a qualification or a certification. It's the same location. You'll select the Create a New Qualification, and a box will come up. Within the box, you're basically filling out the areas of the qualification template. So to start off, you can add groups in the tool, and the groups is just a way for you to combine or group certain qualifications or pre-qualifications together. Currently on the account, we have one group, which is the City of Tallahassee qualification forms, and we have another group called pre-qualification forms. If you needed to create a new group, you could do that by selecting Create New Group and then type in the group name here. In this case, I'm going to use an existing group. We have three different options for basically the rules that the qualification or certification can follow. So the first one is agency use only. Qualifications or certifications in the system can be shared throughout all of our other agency organizations. So for instance, if City of Tallahassee has a department that is not directly under their account, but maybe under another account in the BidSync system, and you want to create qualifications or certifications for them to piggyback off of, you could make this so that it's public, so that they could piggyback off of a qualification or certification. Most agencies designate agency use only because these qualifications or certifications in your tool are for you to manage so that you can have it for reporting purposes, for approval to submit offers for vendors, and designate which type of vendors you're working with. So definitely select this box if you're not wanting this qualification to be publicly shared with other agencies in the BidSync network. The two other types of solicitation or qualifications we can create are agency managed and agency approved. The agency managed qualification is a qualification that allows you to input the information on behalf of the vendor. So for instance, if you wanted to track an MBE certification along with a license number and an expiration date, and the vendor is filling that information out in another location, so they're qualifying or certifying through another location or another system, but you also want to document that in the BidSync tool, then you will select agency managed because you're going to have to come into the system and input that data in vendor. If you leave it unmarked, that means that you are allowing the vendor to complete the information on their own. So you're allowing the vendor to self-identify instead of identifying for them.
Well, hello, Shannon.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, well, most specifically for our certification, we manage that because we can't, I mean, but then I would think, I don't know what the policy is for the vendor registration. Do they provide documentation of certifications that y'all would then input, or?
We don't track any other certifications.
So if they say a CPA, they don't have to provide any documentation that shows they're a CPA?
No.
So ours would be the only certification that we self-identify. I mean, that we would agency identify.
For agency managed, yes.
Okay.
There are going to be some other ones that Diane Blanton is looking at using for like electrical contractors. And Shannon will, as we get a little further along, you'll see those and how they relate to yours. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll talk about another instance called agency approved, which we created for Diane, as Andre mentioned. But the agency managed is, we do have a few qualifications in the tool that follow that rule, because you are using another system to track and manage those qualifications. But this gives you the opportunity to come into the BidSync tool and add that information in for the vendor, so you can track it here as well. So that way you have a qualification certification connected in the tool to a vendor, so that as they participate on solicitations, you can identify that certification or qualification, and you can report off of that data as well. You also have the ability to search for vendors under those certifications. And so that's another reason why you would like to hold those qualifications or certifications in the tool, so you can search for vendors that hold those and invite them to solicitation. The next option we have is agency approved. Now, this is a certification that's set up with information the vendor needs to provide back to you. So the vendor would complete a form if you've provided them a form to download and complete. If there's data information that you're wanting to capture, a license number, an expiration date, where they were certified, so any data fields that you're wanting to capture associated to a certification, the vendor would come in, complete that information. It then gets sent through the tool to the user managing that certification, and they would have to come in and approve or deny the vendor. If it's approved, the vendor is in the system as holding that certification. If it's denied, the approver can list why it was denied, and that will get sent back to the vendor. So if they needed to make changes and then resubmit, they could. They are not shown as a vendor holding that qualification until they are approved. So for instance, with pre-qualification forms, we've set them up to be agency approved, because the vendor has to be approved to hold that qualification, that pre-qualification, before they can participate in a solicitation. When creating a qualification, you have a list of users in the tool that will be shown or displayed in the Qualification Contact section. Now, these are users that have the qualification management permissions. So they're going to receive notifications related to qualifications. They can create qualifications and approve qualifications. You can identify a specific contact for a qualification. So Daryl could be a contact for this qualification that we're creating, because he's going to be specifically over it, or you could not identify a contact. And in the case of a contact not being identified, it would then send out a notification to everyone in the tool. So if you're wanting to make sure that a specific user is identified, you need to select the user there. That makes sense? So if you're wanting everybody to receive a notification, do not select a user. If you're wanting only one user to be identified and managed, select that user. If you do not see a user in here and you need them, then you will need to talk to an admin to have them add the correct permissions so that that user will show up under this Qualification Contact section.
Just out of curiosity, with Diane being in the group with us, would she receive what we were sending, or not necessarily?
If you have not selected a designation, so for instance, if it's just Daryl, LaTanya, and Shanae that need involved in that qualification, then select those three and leave Diane out. The same will go for Diane's pre-qualification forms. She'll be the only one selected so that she's just getting the pre-qualification notification. But if you leave it blank, then yes, everybody will receive a notification. The abbreviation section is where you're going to define the abbreviation of the qualification. So for instance, let's say that we have a MBE qualification. We want to designate that this is a City of Tallahassee qualification. We're going to identify the name of the qualification. I'm just going to write test so I can remember to delete this one. And then a description of the qualification. So this would be things that you want the vendor to be aware about, or a description about the qualification itself. So it could even be instructions like, please go to this website to complete your MBE certification. Once you have done that, the agency will designate that you hold this qualification in the qualification management tool. So it can be a series of instructions, or it can just be information about it, about the qualification. It could even just be MBE certification. So you decide what description you want held here, but this is a description pertaining to the certification itself. Once you've filled out this first section, you're going to hit save. And all that has done is created the template for the certification. Let's see if we can find it here on the list. I think I added it under the, there it is right here. So it's just added the base of the template. Once you have done that, you then need to go in and identify the additional information you're wanting to capture on that qualification. So over here, we'll see edit and new certification. We could edit that qualification and change the information in the tool and resave, and all that's done is saved the main part of our template. To add in additional data fields or data information that you're needing to capture, you'll select New Certification. And this is where you're going to identify the name of the certification, again with a description, and then the data field. You could also define here if it's going to be agency managed, meaning that you are going to enter the data in for the vendor, or you could leave it unchecked, meaning the vendor is going to be allowed to enter it in. In this case, I think we have it as agency managed here as well, because we are wanting to identify the data that we're going to be putting in on the main qualification template. So again, this name could still be MBE certification if we wanted to. We could title it different, MBE form or MBE evaluation, whatever you wanted to title this section, you could, but it can be exactly the same as the title of your certification. So I'm just going to call it MBE test. This description here is more going to identify the different data fields that the vendor will be filling out. So this could still be instructions on this information will be completed by the MBE team once your certification has been validated through your internal or your other qualification management tool. So basically, this is just a description and a way for you to leave information to the vendor so they have kind of some insight to the qualification. You're going to identify if the certification expires, yes or no. If you select yes, you're able to change your warning days. So how many days do you want to notify you and the vendor of the certification expiring? So this is a great way to know if those certifications have expired and the vendor needs to be renewed. And then the requested information field is where you're now going to start to develop the data fields that you're wanting to capture on the certification or qualification. So you might want a license number. And then you need to define, is that going to be a mandatory field that the vendor, or in our case, the agency has to fill out since it's agency managed? Do we want it to be a text entry, a yes or no, a date box? Do we want it to be a case where the vendor has to download a form and then upload it back to us for review? Do we want it to just be a form that the vendor has to download? So this could also be where the vendor would have to upload a certification to you. And is it going to be a multi-select field where they can enter a single select or a multi-select? So we'll kind of cover each one of these in our demo. This license number, I'm going to make it a text entry field, and then I'm going to hit save and add more requested info fields because I'm wanting to add in additional field types for the certification. If I was done, I could hit save. So I'll select this. It then gives me a clear box. So I can say, ask a question. I'm just going to say, ask a question. So this could be any question. Do you hold an MBE? Yes or no. Are you a local vendor? Yes or no. So it could be any question, and we're going to use the yes or no box to address that. And then I'm going to make it required and save and add more. So you can see down here, it's starting to accumulate all the fields that we're creating. Another field I'm going to put in is an MBE form. And maybe this is a form that the vendor has to download. So I'm going to search for that form on my computer. I'm going to upload that form. And once it's uploaded, it will display the link so I can see that's been uploaded. And then I can make it required. So what this feature will make the vendor, or in our case, the qualification admin, they'll have to download the form, fill it out, and then upload it as an attachment. So this feature is more used for the vendor if you're needing them to be approved or denied to hold a certification. They'll actually attach the certification form that they need to complete so that they can download it. The vendor would complete it and then upload it back to you, which comes back through the system for you to approve or deny. I'm going to save and add another field. I'm going to title another one MBE form because maybe we're just wanting the vendor to upload their form. We're not wanting them to download and fill out anything and then return it back. Or you could do qualifications. You could even do, if they're working with subs, maybe they have to provide you a sub list. So this is one way that you could do that through a certification if you needed to. So then I'm going to go save and add more. And then we're going to create a text box. So, so you could do, what color are your eyes? We'll just use this as an example. But if you needed to ask a question and they could pick an answer, you could use a multiple choice box. And then down below, it will give you a spot to type in the answers they can choose from. And you can continue to add more boxes if you needed to. You can also do that with a multi-select. So the difference between the two is a single select is the vendor or the person managing the qualification will only be able to select one answer, where the person managing or the vendor completing it can select multiple answers. So that's the difference between the two. Now I'm done completing all the data fields that I'm wanting to capture on a certification level. So I'm just going to add this one, and then I'm going to select save. If I needed to change the format or the order of these, I could do that using these arrows off to the right. I can delete any certification if I needed to, and I can still edit any certification if I needed to. Once the certification is done, you'll hit save, and that will now save the certification in the system for you to view. Let me just refresh that so it will display. So now with our MBE Tallahassee test, we now have two features. So we have the edit and new qualification, but we also have an edit certification. And that's the certification piece that we just created with those data fields for either the vendor or the person managing the certification to enter in. If you want to view what it looks like, you can select vendor view on the left, and it will show us here's the data fields that we selected, here's the data that, or the description that we put in, and our title. If you needed to edit that, you could select edit here, and you continue to add more fields or change the information. Or you can edit straight from here as well by selecting edit. So now that you've created the certification or qualification, it is not active. For you to make it active, you do have to select the box in this column. It will select both the main certification and the data fields. And once you hit save, that will then activate the qualification to be used in the tool. If for whatever reason you need to remove a certification, you can still do so by selecting this delete qualification here. And that will delete the qualification in the tool. Is there any questions on how to create a qualification?
Nope, it doesn't appear that there is a question.
Okay, so we're going to look at some forms that we've already created in the system. So in our tools admin qualification section, we see a list of all these certifications. We can see that there's the City of Tallahassee qualification forms and the pre-qualification forms that Diane will use. If we want to view what has been added, we can come in again and hit view, vendor view. So this is the Tallahassee Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. I can see that title there. I can see that it's an agency used only and it's an agency managed. So when created, that's what it was identified as. So this means that you, your team will have to manage this certification by coming in and entering in the data for the vendor. And I will show you how to do that in just a little bit. But to view the how it was created, you'll select vendor view. And this shows us that there's an expiration date field and a license number field. And the title and the description are the same. And this certification is entered by the agency. If the agency sets an expiration date, both the agency and the vendor would receive a notification, letting them know that it's expired. If we had to make changes, so once you're testing the qualifications in the tool and you're reviewing the qualifications in production, if you realize that the qualification needs to be changed, you have that ability by selecting Edit Qualification. If you decide it doesn't need to be agency managed, you would deselect that. If only Daryl, Latanya, and Shanae need to receive the notice, then we would select them and save. So now we've just changed that so Diane won't get a notification of the qualification related to the Tallahassee Airport Concessions Disadvantage, just the ones that were selected. If you need to make changes to the field data tied to this certification, you'll select Edit Certification, and you can make changes. So you can change your warning time. You can change the fields that we've created. So we just created a license number field. We can make it required or unrequire it. And the date field that you saw, the certification expires, comes from here, but you could create a field called date. The thing that's great about using this field is this field will send out a notification Whereas if you were to put a date down below, that date field would not be tied to sending a notification out in the system. It's more just to track a date, not to send out a notification notifying you. So if you don't want to send out a notification of expiration, select no. And then you could create a text box or a date box field so that you could manage the expiration date here, knowing that that field would not send out a notification. However, if you want to set up send out a notification, you'll select yes. And right now we have the certifications to send out a notification. Let's take a look at one of the pre-qualification forms so you can just see how those were created. So we'll look at the circuit breaker pre-qualification. We're seeing that this is a circuit breaker pre-qualification form. It's agency use only. And in this certification, we're requiring a date and we're requiring the vendor to download a form and then upload it back to the tool so that the agency admin, which Diane would be that in this case, would be able to approve or deny the pre-certification form. If Diane or whoever else is managing this needs to come in and make changes, they could come in and change the fields. They could change the title, the abbreviation, the name, the description. And again, we can even make changes to the actual field data itself, which in this case is only the form. So if the form needed to be renewed, then we could come in and edit, replace the form so that the new form's now displaying. So one task that you guys will need to do is to come into the production environment and view all of the certifications that have been created so that we can make sure that they're set up appropriately for you. Because if we need to make any changes, we definitely can. If there's some certifications or qualifications on this list that you're not wanting to manage in the tool, then we could go ahead and remove those. The same will go for Diane. We want to make sure that Diane comes in, or whoever else helps manage the pre-qualification forms, comes in and reviews the form there or there and makes any necessary changes, and then saves the changes. Now, once we're ready to go live, we will then turn on all of these qualifications so that they're now available to vendors to manage and available for you to manage. So right now they're turned off, so you're not able to come in and manage the qualification or certification, which is why I have this first one turned on, so I can show you how to do that. So is there any questions on managing the qualification form or viewing the data?
No. You do?
Okay, before I show you how to manage the qualifications that we've created, I want to just touch on these two features here. There's some standard qualifications that you can use that are just part of the BidSync tool. Now, nobody is validating this information, but if you decide to use it, what will happen is the vendor can come in and just say, yes, I'm a DBE, or yes, I'm an MBE. We decided not to use this in your account because you're going to be managing your own under the agency qualification and certification section. But just so you're aware, that's what the standard qualifications are. They're just standard qualifications held in the BidSync system for the vendor to come in and say that they hold. The other agency qualifications, these are qualifications that have been made public by other agencies. So they didn't check the agency managed box. They made their certification or qualification public in case you wanted to join in and use it. So most likely for other organizations associated with them. If you decide that you want to use it, then you'll select the box. And what will happen is that agency still manages the entire qualification. You just have the ability to see who they've approved or denied. And we're not using that feature either because we've built out all of your qualifications under the first tab.
Want to take that list a little bit longer?
Sure.
Shannon, would you mind going to the other agency qualifications again just for a moment so
Yeah.
we can look if there's anything there that they might be interested in?
Yeah, just let me know once you're ready to.
Okay, thank you. None of them are too close to us. They're mainly South Florida. I don't see anything that y'all be interested in necessarily, do you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we have started the MOT.
What is it? Say Hollywood?
Hollywood, Florida has the intermediate maintenance of traffic certification.
Yeah, that's ours. That's our MOT certification.
Well, that's City of
It's
Hollywood.
That's there.
But I'm saying that's the certification that she just referenced, is the MOT training.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Right. So we would be creating possibly a new one in the future.
Under ours, we would.
Right.
And we're going to be looking to create other, as we can, as the government, regarding certifications, as we try to create these learning academies to certify our vendors. We'll be using her instructions to create those
Okay.
beyond WSB.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Shannon. We're ready.
Okay. So what we'll be looking at now is how do you, so Daryl, this is kind of pertaining to you right now, you and your team. How do you come in and identify that a vendor holds this qualification, which is the Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise? So it's turned on in the system, but where you actually need to associate it to a vendor is we're still in the qualification section, but we'll have to click on search vendors. This will take us to the place where we can locate the vendor in the vendor management tool. So it brings us to the search section. Here you can search for the vendor by their name. You can even flag them as a preferred vendor, which means they are one of the vendors connected directly to your account. You can search by a city, a zip, or region. So you're just going to be entering in a name. So I'm just going to type in a name and hit search at the bottom. And once I do that, it will pull up anything that associates to the name that I've put in. Now here, I can see a lot of information about the vendor. I can see the name, where they're located. If they're one of our preferred vendors, meaning that they're a vendor that came over or a vendor that we do business with and we flagged them as a preferred. They're not blocked, meaning that they are allowed to participate in our solicitations. And are they receiving bid notifications? So right now in the system, bid notifications are turned off for this client because they are not a registered vendor. They've the notifications. They've just been added as a placeholder, but I could also export this to a spreadsheet. If the vendor that you're needing to identify the qualification for is not found in the tool, you can create what's called a placeholder account for them, which is Quick Add Vendor. So you'll select that, you'll fill out this data for them and save it. So you go to next and then save. And once you've done that, the vendor will then be in the tool for you to choose from. So that's a way to add in a vendor if they're not already here. But going back to our search, I've located the vendor that I need. This is the vendor that sent in the application in the location and area that they're located in. So I would select the title of their name, which takes me into their vendor profile. So I will be able to see all of their information here once it loads. And then this is also where you will identify their certification information. So up top, I can see their name, address information, the main contact. If I needed to add a new contact for somebody that I work with, I want to hold that on the account, I could do that here. If I wanted to switch this vendor to a preferred vendor so that I can search for them under our preferred vendor search, we could do that. If there's a specific vendor code that you keep track for this vendor, you could add that in. But where we really want to focus in on is this qualification section. So this is where you will identify that qualification information for this vendor, which is Hughes Supply in our example. So you'll select View Details. That will bring up the qualification form. So I'm just selecting the box, and then here's the qualification that is turned on. So we want to identify the information here. So we will select the expiration date for the vendor. We will type in their license number, and we will indicate that the vendor complies with this qualification. You will then put your password in to validate that, yes, you have the authority in the system to add in this information, and you will then submit. Once you do that, that will hold this qualification information on this vendor's profile. So the vendor doesn't have access to enter this in on their own because we've set it up as an agency managed certification. So once you save it, which I'm not going to because we're in production, you would still be able to come here at any time and see the data that you've put in if you've saved. So in this case, I didn't save, so we're not seeing the data, but you could always come here to view that vendor's certification information.
Question.
Yeah.
It was more so process-wise. I understand people relative to the but for example, the way that we are now, when they say I heard X, Y, Z, will your process be to become more reliant on this system as opposed to there may be things that they have to submit to procurement as a part of a bid response? Will you still require that, or is the idea that you'll be solely identifying qualifications?
The focus of a bid-specific qualification will be with the bid. At this point in time, the only qualifications that we're going to be doing outside of the decision that Diane and Fran and Shannon will still be confirming is the MBE. Okay. There is a chance that if Diane feels that she wants to have electrical vendors qualified for a year or 3 years, that we might have a qualification that says these vendors that have this qualification at this period of time will be the ones that are invited to electrical engineering opportunities. But we don't have that completely nailed down. The qualifications that we will be having are different MBEs. Okay.
All right. Now on that, any way qualifies certain vendor groups like sidewalk, buildings, roads. Is that something that he would have to go in and establish if in case there's bids that come out? I do know on certain ones like sidewalks, they're there for a certain number of years, and Public Works will put out a bid to them, knowing that they're already certified because it's been a little icon deal.
Okay. To answer your question, yes, we could do something like that. We have talked amongst ourselves as possibly using this tool for the storing of our qualifications for our citywides. And that's what you're referring to, right? We have yet to determine whether the squeeze is worth the juice.
Yeah.
Okay? we don't know what the impact would be to our departmental business processes, because Kenny, all he has to do is, if it's under a certain amount, I think he can just choose anybody he wants.
True.
And if it's over a certain amount, then he has to at least go get quotes, right? If he wants to go through the setup of doing the qualifications with the end dates, and the only way he'd be able to take advantage of BidSync to do that is if he set up a quote or a bid in BidSync to get the estimate for the task order that's over the $5,000 or whatever it is. So we would need to, one, decide as procurement, is this something we want to look into, and then confer with our department to see, would you see yourself using a system like this to obtain your task orders? If you imagine it as being something viable and something that you think your department would be interested in, then I think we should certainly explore it. Would you agree, Fran?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Shannon, for giving us that few minutes to talk about how we might use this.
Yeah. Okay, so we just talked about how to search for a vendor if you needed to add a qualification to their account. But I also want to just show you in the search vendor feature how you can search for vendors that are attached to a specific qualification or certification. So you're using the same search vendor, but when you're searching for the vendor, you have this qualification box, and any qualification that is turned on in your account, you have access to search for the vendor for. So you'll select it and then hit search to search for the vendor in the account. The reason why we're not seeing all the other qualifications and certifications is because they are not turned on. So that's something to keep in mind. But this is a great feature to use if you're wanting to do a search for all the vendors that have that data, and then you can export that data here. This is also a great use case scenario for those users that are doing solicitations, because when they're doing solicitations, they can also search for vendors that hold that specific qualification or pre-qualification to specifically invite them to participate in a solicitation. Okay, I'm going to switch views because I want to talk about the pre-qualification form. So let me log in to a training environment. So with some of the forms that Diane are using, well, all the forms that Diane are using, we have attached the actual pre-qualification form. And we're requiring that a vendor complete the form and then upload it to the certification or the qualification. Once they do that, whoever is connected to receive the notification for the qualification would get an email letting them know that a qualification has been submitted. And then they could come into the tool and select vendor qualification. Oh, it might be in the sales environment, I'm wondering. Let's see if we can change our view real fast. But it would show up here, the vendor that submitted, the date, the name, which qualification they submitted for, and then the approval or denial. There would be a link in here to go to the vendor's qualification, which takes you to the exact search vendor where you can view the qualification form that the vendor submitted. Then you would have the option to approve or deny that certification depending on the information that you're. So if you're working with a approving or denying of those certification forms, this is where that is done. And so most likely this will be Diane, I'm assuming. Is it just her that work with those forms, or is there other users internally that you work with those approved denying of pre-qualifications? You know, Andre?
Only Diane at this point.
Okay. Diane's the only you have in the system. So all of those pre-qualification forms will be tied to her, meaning that she will be the one that will manage those qualifications. And she's responsible for doing the approving and denying of those certifications here. So let me change my view so you can see it. Okay, I just changed my screen so that you can see here under the vendor qualification is where you manage the approval or denial. So any qualification that had that box checked for agency approved, this is where the approval happens. So you can click on the name here. When you click on the name, it will take you into the vendor's profile where you can view the pre-qualification form, and then here you're able to approve or deny. So when I select that, oh, it also lets you see the form here as well. So I can view the form. So here's the form downloading. This obviously would be a completed form by the vendor itself based on the information they provided back to me. You could replace the form or delete the form here. You can even download the original form that you uploaded when you created the certification, but the real intent here is to view the form that was sent back to you and uploaded by the vendor so that you can either approve or deny them. So once you've viewed the form, you can come down here and hit approve or deny. If you deny, there's a box that will display for you to put your notes into the vendor, letting them know why you have been denied. So the expiration date has expired. So we are denying your certification. Please renew the certification and provide a current expiration date. So you can submit notes like that to the vendor, or you can select approve. You can put the password in and hit submit. Now, once you have approved, that now will hold on the vendor's profile that they have this pre-qualification. So if there's any users that are getting ready to submit or create solicitations, and they need to search for vendors that hold this pre-qualification form, they could select the pre-qualification form, do a search in the system for all vendors that hold that pre-qualification, and then they could invite them to participate in the solicitation. So that's kind of the use case scenario that we're trying to help Diane, is with these pre-qualification forms to allow for vendors to come in and pre-qualify to house that they hold that pre-qualification so that they can be invited to solicitations. Now, vendors could still pre-qualify, they just could not place an offer on the solicitation until they have been approved. That's why it's very important for Diane to manage the vendor qualifications and make sure she's getting people approved that submit that qualification form so that they can come in and participate. So is there any questions about this approving, denying a qualification from the standpoint of a qualification being set up to be approved by an agency?
That's going to be you guys versus MBE.
Sure. Nancy covered. Unfortunately, there are times when vendors are suspended in their operation. Is there a way to do that? Okay. I may have missed it.
Okay, Shannon, we have a question.
Okay.
Just in case it didn't come clearly through the phone. Is there a way that even though a vendor may be certified and their expiration date has not been exceeded, that we can decertify them for a period of time?
Only if it is agency managed can you do that, because if you're allowing the vendor to self-identify, then they're controlling that certification. If you do not want the vendor to hold a certification anymore, then let's move back to your environment so I can show you that. So if we're searching for a vendor and this Hughes Supply, we decide that we don't want them to hold that certification anymore, then we will need to come into their account, click on View Details, and then deselect this box, because this box will indicate that they comply. If you're wanting to turn it off for a period of time, you'll have to deselect that, put your password in, and submit, so that it removes them from holding that certification or qualification until you come back in and say they comply.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so something that you will want to make sure that you're doing during your testing phase is you'll want to make sure that you're reviewing all the qualifications, you're creating a qualification, you're creating additional data to be held under the qualification, and you know how to come in and search for a vendor and apply the certification to the vendor, or you know how to view the vendor qualification so that you can approve and deny a vendor. One thing to keep in note is sometimes when you move throughout the pages, if you look under tools, I don't see that admin section anymore. There's a qualification section. I can click on that to get back to where I need to be, or you can double click on tools and then go to the admin. So just keep in mind that sometimes that tools tab will look a little bit different. So if you don't see tools admin to get to the qualification section, you can just select qualifications. And this is where all the qualifications would be housed. For those users in the room, you will be given access to the training environment. Andre has your login information. He'll have the URL to access training so that you can get into the tool and you can add qualifications, edit qualifications, make them available so that you can go in and search for a vendor and apply the certification to the vendor, or search for the vendor and deselect their qualification. So you'll want to make sure you're practicing all of that stuff. Once you're ready, I would also like for you to access production to come in and view the qualifications that we have on the account to make sure that they are set up correctly before we make them active qualifications. And that's something I would like done by Diane as well with the pre-qualification forms. We don't want to be making anything active in production until they've been reviewed by the team that will be managing this section of the system. Now, if you get stuck when you're playing around in the tool, there is a support.bidsync.com website that you will have access to. The URL will also be provided to you by Andre, but you will need to make sure that you are creating a login. It's going to be different than your login that you will use for production and for training. So you'll need to sign up first. Once you've signed up, you will have access into the support portal, and then you can search here for how to do things in the system. So one thing that you're managing is qualifications. So if I just do a qualification search, it will bring up different user guides for managing qualifications. So qualification, creation, and use, that looks like a good knowledge base for you to come in and read over to give you step-by-step on how to create your qualification or certification in the system. So this tool is a great resource for you to come to if you have questions. The recording will also be available to you. So if you want to come back and refer to this recording, you will have that. But if there are any questions beyond what we're able to address today, then please submit your questions to Andre or Claudia, And then if they cannot answer your questions, they will reach out to myself and I will get your questions addressed for you. So before we end, are there any questions or anything else that I will need to address on this call?
Shannon, quick question as it relates to testing.
Yes.
Would you suggest that my first idea was, like, I've been using Test Vendor 3. Would it be okay to give Test Vendor 3 an ACDBE certification and use that as a test, or do you have another vendor in mind?
No, you can definitely use that vendor. So the vendor accounts that you have right now that you're using to place offers on solicitations, you can use those vendors to go in and submit qualifications, or if it's a pre-qualification form, to complete a pre-qualification form, or it could even be used for Daryl and his team to go in and find that vendor and then apply the certification to that vendor. So you can definitely use those vendor accounts.
And then my second question is, you know, everybody has IDs on our procurement team, but do I need to, I don't know exactly what IDs you may have turned on yet and test. Do I need to tell you that Daryl, LaTanya, and Shanae came today, or should I just give them another email that has the support link, tell them that their ID is their email address and their password is test?
Yeah, so everybody's already turned on in the training environment with the username, which is their email address, and the password test. So everyone that's on the training today should already be able to access the system. They will, however, need to create a login in the support portal so that they have access there.
Okay, and I'll explain that. Yep.
And if for some reason a user is unable to access the training environment, then please let me know, because I can go in and reset their password for them, or make sure they have the right role connected to their user, because there might be a case where maybe a user wasn't connected to the right role, so they don't have access to what they need to. So please let me know if you're running into any of those instances.
Okay. And then my last question is related to passwords. You know, everybody today has lots of passwords. And I was presented with a question from a team member or a department user, I can't remember which. Does BidSync require users to change their password every X number of days, or can someone stick with a password and it won't change?
We haven't set up an expiration in the tool, and so the password should remain. But I will see if the system automatically requires a password change. But as of right now, I haven't set it to expire. So they should be able to use the same password going forward, unless they ever change it down the road because they've forgotten it and had to request a password change.
All right. We're not asking for that functionality, but I was just wondering if it was already there.
Yeah, no, we haven't turned it on, and I don't believe the system automatically will shut you down at a certain time.
Okay, wonderful. Anybody have any other questions, comments, concerns about anything that they've seen today? Okay. All right, Shannon, thank you again. We appreciate your time and support and your effort and your knowledge especially.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great training today. So if there are any additional questions, please reach out, and then we'll get these trainings made available to you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.